Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. I've paused recording new episodes for a break here at the end of 2022, but that doesn't mean that you have to go without. In the spirit of reinforcing my intention to create on-demand resources that stand the test of time, and that these episodes are not the you had to be there each week when they were released type, please enjoy some of my select replay episodes that have great guests, fantastic conversations, and valuable topics for elevating the architectural profession, especially as it pertains to the role of technology in the evolution of architectural practice. If you want even more, please check out my Troxel episode database, TED for short, at trxl.co/TED, where you can find my entire catalog of episodes categorized by keywords and more. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. So how are you doing?
Oh, I'm all right.
Looks like there's some sunshine over there.
Not really.
No?
I live in Connecticut, and I'm looking out the window right now, and it's cloudy, and it's actually snowing at this moment, but it's not sticking.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a nice soft lighting then. I mean, you're getting the
in
soft...
this room?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's by design. Where are you?
I'm in Southern California. I'm near LA. I'm in a town called Claremont, which is like a college town.
Yeah,
so.
in Claremont. One of my cousins went to school there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom worked at the colleges for 25 years, so I've grown up in this area.
Well, that's good. Well, I'm sure the weather's better. If the pandemic is worse, the weather's at least better.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's been a weird winter. We've gotten one rain in the last 9 months, so we're supposed to get a bunch next week, hopefully.
We've actually only had one snowstorm with any real snow all winter, which is great. I mean, frankly, not that it matters to me because you can't leave your house.
Yeah.
Barely go out of my house.
Right.
So it's fine.
Yeah. It's fine.
Okay. Look, I can't complain.
Right.
I have a house that I bought. We bought this house how long ago was it? We bought this house in 1992. So it was 28 years ago, raised 4 kids in it. It's a big house. We're still here. They're not.
Yeah.
We got plenty of room.
Yeah.
During the workday, my wife has her own floor. I have my own floor. So
the Bernstein Corporation is running well.
It's the artifact of having raised 4 children.
Yeah.
And not having, we talked last year about, should we get rid of this house, empty nesters? But, they're starting to produce grandchildren. Now they're coming back. Maybe not. Let's see. And then,
wow.
I've been pretty much sitting in this chair since the middle of March of last year.
Yep. Me too. Yeah, it's tough. That part of it's tough for me. I actually built out this space, same chair, different room, because I was in the bedroom for quite a while, and just like remodeled one large room into 2. And it's been nice to have a change of scenery. And then I'll force myself to take the laptop off the desk and go somewhere else and sit, and it helps. But I don't do that enough, for sure.
Yeah, I have too much infrastructure here to move around. I got things exactly the way I want them.
Yeah.
Screens in the right place, lights, cameras, all that stuff. So I don't move around that much.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I thought maybe we could start by talking about school, start talking about students and the kind of ideas that you're exploring with business models.
Sure. Well, about 5 or 6, probably 6 years ago at this point, I started teaching this course called Exploring New Values of Design Practice. And the thought was that there was an emergent interest amongst, architecture students are like students everywhere. They're very much caught up in the innovation, startup, I want to do my own thing mode, which matches up very nicely with my interest in finding alternative value propositions for architectural practice. So I decided to start teaching a class on this topic, which was, it operates sort of in 3 modalities. In one modality, we try to deconstruct the business models of traditional architectural practice, both looking at strategy and mechanics. So I want them to understand the actual mechanisms of how, when dollars come in the door, how they convert, how that actually flows, so they can understand how time is converted into money. But also strategy, which is a very discontinuous thing in architectural practice. That a lot of firms, the strategy of a lot of firms is, the explicit strategy of a lot of firms is, I'm a better designer than you. But firms have a lot of implicit strategies by which they position themselves. They specialize in certain markets. They specialize by scale. They specialize by geography. They're good at certain kinds of building types. They're good at delivery. They're high designers. There's all sorts of different dials you can turn there. So we spend some time working on that. Then we spend time looking at business models and business strategies in the building industry and in other disruptive, creative endeavors, just to have something to compare to. Mm-hmm. So let's see. I have my syllabus here that I'm teaching this course this semester. We start in a couple of weeks. So this semester, I'm going to have a guy who runs a venture capital fund for AEC firms and what companies he's seeing. The guys from Spacemaker that Autodesk just acquired is a kind of a startup. Somebody who does architect-led design build, someone who does architect-led development, somebody from Sidewalk Labs, a contractor, somebody who specializes in research as a value proposition, a couple of practitioners, just a real mix of different sorts of folks who talk about how they manipulate their business models to generate value in a different way. And then the real proposition of the semester is you have to design a business. And the definition of a business is anything you use your architectural talents, training, and skills in the service of. Doesn't even have to be in the building industry, but it has to be predicated on a non-commoditized value proposition. In other words, your business cannot charge fixed fees nor hourly fees.
Interesting.
So you have to translate the value proposition into a different monetization strategy in order to demonstrate that you have a different value proposition.
How many times have you taught this course so far?
I think this year will be the 7th.
Okay. Do you get a lot of like the value proposition as a product kind of a idea coming out of this?
I'll send you a copy of this article that I wrote last year in AD. Dennis Sheldon, who at the time was at Georgia Tech but is now at RPI, edited an edition of AD called The Disruptors. Mm-hmm. And I wrote an article about this course where I tried to describe typologically the different kinds of projects I'd seen, because at that point I'd seen probably 50 projects.
Yeah.
And they tend to fall into 3 categories. One set of projects is the architect as an architect and a developer, the architect as an architect and a contractor. So that was one set of strategies. The second set of strategies didn't try to assume both roles, but to try to create a bridge between one or more roles. So, for example, someone would propose being an IPD integration platform, where they would serve as the IPD integrator on a project, or a data translator between construction information and building asset operation. So they weren't controlling those things like in a project delivery sense. They were creating a bridge between 2 or more sectors of the phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And then the third category were all the cats and dogs, which were mostly things that the students felt the building industry needed that they didn't have. Mm. Software ideas, services ideas. I've seen some really crazy stuff like a model curation service. Like, I worked in a firm where there were a lot of models and nobody knew what to do with the models. So you can store your models with us and we'll take care of them. And we'll have a little model museum in the front.
It's like the Indiana Jones warehouse with
exactly. That was probably somebody that, for example, had worked for Frank Gehry. Yeah. And the other side of Frank's office is this giant model warehouse.
Model shop. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So just lots of episodic ideas.
Yeah.
That are like that. Sometimes the students get enamored of the gig economy and try to map those kinds of ideas. Sometimes they grab a hold of something they think is a really serious problem. Like, we are an integrated design build firm that guarantees price. Mm. And it's just very interesting to see them exercise their muscles with this.
And how long does that process do you take to go through that process with them? The whole semester, but like that, is that like the final project is to actually design this business? And how long is that project right there?
When we first started teaching the course, it's a 13-week semester and then a week of final reviews. And we teach 10 weeks and give them and start them off on the final project in the last 3.
Okay.
But as we've been teaching the course, the beginning of the project development process has crept earlier and earlier in the semester.
Yeah.
And I've created different techniques for doing that. Now what we do is by the midpoint of the semester, once they've gotten their feet wet, we actually run a weekend ideation workshop with a colleague who's actually going to be teaching the course in the fall. But she's an architect who spent most of her career with IDEO.
Yeah.
She teaches ideation methodologies, and she gets them together fairly early so they can workshop their ideas and eventually form coalitions and eventually form teams. Okay. And so by after spring break, which is roughly in a normal year, the midpoint of the semester, we don't have a spring break this year, they're working on something.
Yeah, interesting.
And they work on it for about 6 or 7 weeks. But you got to remember, these are architecture students.
Yeah.
Their attention wafts.
It's their side job.
It's their side job.
Yeah.
Besides studio.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. And so the guest speakers that you're bringing into that, obviously very kind of entrepreneurial and maybe more avant-garde than traditional practice, obviously. And then there's the students themselves in typical traditional architectural education is one thing. It sounds like you're taking a different tact at that and looking at training at least these who are interested in entrepreneurialism, because I think a lot of times the traditional architectural professional training is in working for a firm. Well,
because I teach that course in the fall. I teach the required professional practice course in the fall.
Interesting.
So this is kind of, that course has a subtext of these are the characteristics of the profession and the industry that you need to understand and challenge.
Yeah.
And so those people that are really interested in that idea get a chance to challenge them in my second semester course. But my first semester course is required.
Yeah.
So in a normal year when we have a full cohort, it's 60 students.
Right.
My second semester course varies in size between maybe 14 and 24. But what you need to remember is we're a really small school.
Mm-hmm.
And 24 students, of our 240 graduate students at any given time, only about 150 of them are allowed to take elective courses.
Mm-hmm.
If you get 24 out of 150 in a quote unquote elite design school working on a problem like this, pretty good.
Yeah.
I think. It says there's a lot of interest.
And so outcomes, have you seen students pursue any of these after they leave the site?
A few.
Yeah.
But it's hard because I also strongly encourage them to go get a license.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they need to be working toward their license. And I don't think it's, some of my colleagues would probably disagree with me, but I have an ethical problem with charging someone the kinds of prices that we charge for a Yale education and then telling them it's not necessary for them to get a license.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, no one at the Yale Medical School is telling their graduates not to sit for the medical boards, and no one at the Yale Law School is telling their students not to sit for the bar exam.
Yeah, it's totally expected. Yeah, 100%.
So that's the problem. But they do go off and do things. And it's a little early to tell because my students, I've been teaching for 3 decades now, since I was a puppy. And my students, and especially in the last decade, have begun to articulate a strong desire not to practice in traditional ways.
Mm-hmm.
I tell their potential employers that these people want to work for you long enough to get a license
mm-hmm.
and some experience, and then they're leaving. Now, for us at Yale, most of our graduates eventually start their own practices anyway. It's just in the nature of our culture.
Mm-hmm.
But people are off doing some other stuff. So we'll see. It'll be a decade before we know whether any of this stuff is meaningful.
I think the last time that we talked in person, it was in Seattle at the BILT conference in the Design Technology Summit. And one of the topics that came up there, which I think kind of dovetails into this talking about the traditional business model, is kind of how it's set up. I almost want to say designed to fail from the beginning, where we were really talking about the topic of the project is awarded to the architect with the lowest fee. And I'm coming kind of from a public work kind of a standpoint, but I know it's bigger than that even. Lowest fee for the architect, for the professional. And then you award the job to the lowest bidder. Projects themselves are, to be profitable. Less time spent on the project is better, quote unquote, better.
Well, there's certainly a strong incentive to spend as little time as possible, since time is money.
Right. And what's interesting about that particular little bullet point is that, a lot of architects are salaried and they're getting paid the same way, whether they spend more time or less time on it, depending on what you have to do and how many jobs you're working on, all those things. I've never seen a project turn out worse because people have spent more time on it. Obviously, there's there's economics and all kinds of things in there. But it's interesting kind of thinking about that. And do you guys talk about that in the course as well? I would assume that you spend quite a bit of time looking at existing business models, which are kind of majority type business models, which we see in the profession.
Yeah, and the majority of my students in that course have taken my professional practice course in the previous semester.
Mm-hmm.
So they have been deeply immersed in the theories of value propositions and the tactics of fees, fee strategies, fee calculations, and they spend an entire week manipulating a financial model of a firm. So they actually have to go through an exercise where they look at the financial model, an operating model of a firm that varies utilization, overhead, time, average direct labor rates, salaries, and they have to go through an exercise where they can really internalize what it means to give someone a raise, what it means to lower your utilization, what it means when your profit margins are set at 5%, 10%, 20%. So they understand those mechanics. Most of my students do very well.
Yeah. So do you feel like a lot of the projects that then they start working on in that is under their own direction, right? I assume that there's some level of they get to pick the type of business that they're going to design and model.
Absolutely. Complete freedom. And almost nobody picks a traditional architecture.
Yeah. And do you feel like that's reactive, or do you feel like that's because that's not going to live long in this world, or what do you think?
I think given the chance to experiment in a kind of my roommates in the business school taking innovation strategy away, they want to really experiment. They want, and in our program, we prize unique, thoughtful, well-reasoned, new ideas. And I think that students don't want to mess around with the edges of a problem. They want to either throw out the model or try something different. Yeah. And the fact is, at traditional architectural practice, fee-for-service practice, is rather inflexible as to how to change the value proposition.
Yeah.
You either work really efficiently, pay people really low amounts of money, or go work someplace where you don't have much competition. That's basically it. Yep. What other dials do you have to turn?
Right. And that leads to kind of this churn business, right? Where you just have to feed that machine over and over again. And I can imagine,
Absolutely
do you guys
right.
talk about that as a topic as well?
Oh, not only do we talk about the fact that you have to feed the machine, we do a partial session just looking at the financial implications of carrying costs of things as banal as accounts receivable. Because, I try to explain to the students that paycheck that you just received at the end of 2 weeks is money that has not come into the firm's coffers yet.
Right.
And the longer it takes that money to come into the firm's coffers, the way we try to explain that to our students is by saying, you can have a firm that on paper looks really profitable, but in reality is sucking wind. Because if your days of DSO, your days of sales outstanding or accounts receivable, stretch out much past 30 days, then you're borrowing money to cover payroll, which reduces your margins.
Yeah.
I mean, I know this is really banal stuff to be talking about in a Yale classroom, but they need to hear this.
Yeah.
Part of your job is collecting money. And one of my colleagues that runs a small practice, I have a constellation of practitioners that help me teach this course. For lots of reasons, I need the help. I'm not practicing right now. But my co-instructor, who runs a small practice here in New Haven, his average accounts receivable is 10 days. So he can stand up in front of these guys and say, this is the effect that this has on my practice.
Yeah.
The average accounts receivable in the architecture world is 110 days.
Yeah.
So I say to my students, are you a bank? You're basically loaning your clients money.
Right.
Are you a bank? And so, we talk about whether or not there's a discount for paying in less than 30 days. And why not?
Incentivizes the process. Yeah. Interesting. So when you've got that kind of a mentality, and I think you know a thing or two about technology and how it's changing the profession, it seems to me like it's pretty obvious why technology has not changed the profession in meaningful ways other than trying to find efficiencies in the system of churn. It's very much so. Like if you had to generalize it down to that, it seems like you're trying to find very small things that you can do with a computer, for instance, to help make that process a little less painful, but there's no reinvention happening here.
I agree. And it pains me greatly to agree with you, but I've drawn that conclusion on my own. It was the conclusion that I was talking to someone from Boston Dynamics today about, I'm writing a book right now on AI and the profession. So I've been doing some research and was comparing some notes today with the guys from Boston Dynamics, the robotics guys, about what it means to have a robot operating on a construction site. And one of the issues of robotics on a construction site is that you need some kind of context for the robot to operate in. And it would seem obvious that a building information model, for example, would provide that context, but nobody does it. And so they're trying to figure out how to bridge the possibilities of a building information model that languish in the architect's office as a useful artifact on a construction site. And that conclusion that they've drawn is a proxy for the broader conclusion that some combination of the profession's disinterest in innovation, risk avoidance, an unwillingness to innovate, and a failure on the part of the vendors has basically created a circumstance where the technologies of the profession have largely changed dramatically in the last 10 years, from CAD to BIM, but the processes have not changed and the outputs have not changed.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, things are more efficient.
Right. But it's still a means to that paper end, right?
Yeah, so everybody was super excited about AutoCAD because it could produce better working drawings. And I was deeply involved in the Revit phenomenon. The assertion being that the building industry would finally get into a world where there were really powerful tools that could transform processes, and none of it's happened.
Yeah. Yeah, because the process is incentivized for shortcuts, right? Because the model is not the single source of truth. It's a means to that paper end, which is, the contract documents are that so-called single source of truth with all of the errors and omissions that come along with that, part of being the profession that we are.
But why would we as a profession decide that the point of the exercise is a set of working drawings?
Right. That is a decision. I agree.
Yeah, a set of working drawings is a means to an end. And what I wrote about in my last book was changing the ends is the only way we're going to change this construct.
Yeah.
We have to get to an outcome-based way of doing our work.
Which leads us back to the business model. Let's take a quick break to share more about our sponsors. You've heard about Avail here on the Troxel podcast, and I'm excited to tell you they have a new message for you, my friends. Avail is designed by designers for design professionals, so it's no wonder Avail focuses on visuals in its platform. While Avail has always provided high-resolution previews, there are some new visual enhancements you should know about. These are channel cards and key cards. They're visual gateways to your content, and they're both customizable. Channel cards have been available since Avail Desktop 4.0. Think of them like album covers for each content channel you create. Channel cards are designed to make navigating your firm's assets quick and easy. And with channel cards, the look and feel of Avail conforms with your firm's standards. Next up is key cards, and these are the latest addition to Avail and are available since version 4.3. What are they? Keycards visually group content within a channel, and they derive data from your tags to make finding content easier. So they're created from the work you've already done. By adding custom graphics to your keycards, navigating content within a channel improves immediately. Keycards also drive the breadcrumb trail in the latest Avail Desktop 4.3 release. Navigate through your channels using breadcrumbs. And a new breadcrumb control is displayed on a channel when navigating with keycards. Breadcrumb items allow the user to navigate to the previous state easily. To see all of these new visual enhancements in action, head over to getavail.com to learn more. That's getavail, GETAVAIL.com to learn more. And now let's get back to our conversation. What kinds of ideas have you or your students explored with this longer term, bigger framework kind of business models? Because again, like the way that you just framed it as a decision is, I think it's spot on. This is one of those things where we have collectively developed this construct that we are perfectly happy to continue to work within without actually stepping back and looking at the big picture and where we're headed, we as, the profession, to make that change happen. I had an episode earlier, middle of last year with an architect in Indiana, and we talked about this idea of like a 50-year business model where you could continue to upgrade the OS of a building and have it perform better and get paid via that over time rather than for this very short period of time up front in the life of a building project.
The way I started working this thinking out in my last book, I've been trying to elaborate it, but my thesis is that you have to get into a business model that is about doing things, not exchanging commodities. Architecture is supposed to do stuff. There are short-term things and long-term things, and there are low-level things and high-level things. Mm-hmm. And there's actually a hierarchy of outcomes that can be ascribed to the successful life cycle of a building. And if architects can begin to get paid for making things happen as opposed to making working drawings and then hoping that things happen.
Right.
And that's what we do now, right? We make working drawings and we hope that things happen.
Yeah, we've talked about it on the show with several guests. It's design is hypothesis, and that hypothesis is rarely tested after keys are handed over by the contractor. That data is not continued to be collected and learned from to test whether the prototype actually works or not, because you're busy working on the next thing, and that leads to this warehouse of BIM models, right, that never see the light of day again.
Right, and so the way I describe this is there's a hierarchy of these kinds of outcomes that are a function of risk and the aspiration of the team and the degree to which the team collaborates with one another. So at the low end of the continuum of outcomes, where you're just working as the architect, you could do things like deliver your drawings on time, meet the owner's brief correctly, conform to whatever the cost model is. But once you expand that universe to include the contractor, there are a different set of outcomes that become possible around cost and project schedule and delivery and systems commissioning. And then once you include the owner, then it starts to get sort of interesting because the owner has two categories of outcomes they're interested in. One is a kind of building operation outcome, like how much energy is this building using? How much staffing are we requiring? How long do the carpets last? How happy are the people occupying it? Mm-hmm. But the last category is, why did the owner build this building in the first place?
Yeah.
Why did they build this hospital, this school, this shopping center, this library, this research laboratory? They built it to do some stuff.
They built it to employ architects, right?
Well, no, they certainly didn't build it to meet a budget or a schedule.
Right. And they didn't do it to employ an architect either, right? Like that, I think a lot of times our business is, that churn is so embedded that we just get to do these kinds of things. And that is absolutely not why they built that building.
Yeah. And so the thesis is that in some form, technology makes it more likely that the proposition of design and construction is more precise and more predictable in
Mm-hmm.
terms of outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And if those two principles are in fact the case, one should begin to be able to make promises about those outcomes, and those outcome-based promises are convertible to a value proposition.
And so the ones who are willing to take those risks will get the rewards, but there are so many
except
that
there's
are
nobody
not.
doing it.
Yeah.
There's hardly anybody doing it.
Right.
And so the original thesis that originated in the American construction industry really around 2004 was maybe we need an alternative top-down project delivery model.
IPD, right?
Which was IPD.
Yeah.
Which established a bunch of principles, but has not gotten a ton of traction.
Right.
Maybe 400 or 500 projects right now are IPD projects. Relative to the whole industry, not so great. I've been working on a research project with my good friend and colleague, Renee Chang, who's the dean at the University of Washington, College of the Built Environment, sponsored by a Canadian construction company called Chandos that does a lot of IPD work. And we're looking at integration from the completely opposite direction. We're looking at integration bottom up. So we're looking at instances in the North American construction industry where some company has crossed an integration boundary between two or more of the canonical layers of the process, whether you're a designer, a builder, an operator, or a regulator. And if you crossed one or more of those boundaries, in other words, into two of those zones, you're into some kind of episodic verticalization. We haven't finished the study yet, but we're looking to see if there's some kind of emergent theme coming from the bottom up. Renee spent a decade studying IPD from the top down. She's written numerous papers, done studies for GSA about the characteristics of IPD projects. But now we're looking from the opposite direction. I mean, I've only been a full-time academic for 3 years, so I've got a ways to go before I catch up with Renee's prodigious amount of work.
Are there very many examples?
Well, we didn't have any trouble making a long list of about 60 companies.
Okay.
And then we shortened it down to a list of about 20 that were interesting, that had interesting enough characteristics that we thought they might be able to tell us something.
Interesting.
And so we're still analyzing the data right now.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time going, what are these things telling us?
Yeah.
But
and are these kind of startup companies types, or are they more, they've been around for a long time, a mix
all across the board.
Okay.
Startups, old companies trying new things, big companies like Katera, little companies like Lockable. They're all across the board.
With the examples of the types of companies that have been around for a long time, is it a company-wide effort, or is it like an R&D lab within a company? Do you know?
I'm drawing an unsubstantiated conclusion, but the more established the company, the more of a science experiment the verticalization strategy is.
It's like they're incubating their own little startup.
Right. The newer companies are much more free about trying things.
Sure.
Unless you have an unnatural phenomenon like Katera, where they had so much cash, they could just try all kinds of, throw all kinds of crazy spaghetti at the wall. But the spaghetti is starting to rain back down on them now, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah. It is unfortunate because it's those companies that are going to go through those successes and failures that are going to actually change the business.
Yeah, but there was a thesis about that I think is really interesting, which was there was a period of time in the startup era where one startup strategy was you throw so much money at a company that they own the space and no one else can get in.
Right.
So, you bankroll a dog walking company with $200 million in cash and nobody can touch them.
Right.
Well, I mean, that was SoftBank's strategy with Katera.
Right.
And it's interesting, having thrown $1 billion at it or whatever they've done.
Yeah.
More than $1 billion. It's not working.
Right.
Not working.
Yeah.
Tough industry.
Right. Turns out. And so all of that kind of leads me back to where we started with education, right? Because in order to really go down this road effectively of trying new things, you have to educate differently. I mean, that's obviously what your course is about, but not every school has a course like that, and not every student takes it. And then there's the licensure part of it too, which is licensing people for the way that we do or used to practice. And those are all kind of interconnected.
Yeah, but your question presumes that this kind of change happens bottom up as opposed to top down.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wait long enough, if we wait another 20 years for my students who've recently graduated,
Yeah.
become leaders of firms, or say 15 years, you might start seeing some of these changes. But they get absorbed like the Borg into the traditions of the profession, and there are very few firms that can elbow their way into a new way of doing things. There are a few out there. They tend to be either very small theoretical practices or very big corporate practices that are sufficiently resourced that they can afford to do a lot of experimentation.
Right. So with your students going out into the workforce, how are they dealing with the current situation with working out of, wherever they live instead of going to work and learning through osmosis what senior project architects can bestow upon them just by sitting nearby? And I would imagine there's good stuff and bad stuff both happening at the same time here.
Yeah, but the worst stuff is that very few of them are working.
Mm.
The employment circumstances for our graduates from the class of 2020, and I'm extremely fortunate to teach in a place where our students, when the economy is okay, have no trouble getting jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Their issue is, where do I want to work,
mm-hmm.
not whether or not I want to work.
Sure.
And so they're thinking big thoughts and they want to do big things, and they're trying to decide what the best route for their career is. The class of 20, I'd be surprised if 30% of them are working right now.
Mm. Are they really hunkering down and continuing to push in that direction, or are they going off on other tangents?
It's too early to tell. I think they're laying low. I think my guess is that the majority of them are laying low, waiting to see if the economy breaks.
Yeah.
Because I think the economy will break, although I keep a very detailed record of the Architectural Billings Index.
Mm-hmm.
Like when it comes in, I update all my graphs. It just came in today. I'm not sure when this thing's going to be posted. That data is embargoed for a week, but it's not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine.
It continues to be bad.
Yeah.
My thesis, and I hope it's right, is that once we really get we get seriously to 100 million people vaccinated,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to a political fantasy of 100 million people
mm-hmm.
vaccinated, that there's enough pent-up demand that things are really going to break. So the question is, how long can people hold out
mm-hmm.
before things break?
Mm-hmm.
The profession largely transitioned to remote work pretty easily. And my students that did get hired, and a handful of them did get hired, had almost an entire semester of working remotely, because the university, we managed to get School of Architecture open and functioning in September, but March through June, we were completely 100% remote.
Mm-hmm.
So they very quickly built those skills.
Yeah. It seems like the remote work, though, to me, at least in my experience recently, is that things will go back to normal. And so therefore we're going to just use this tool as it is presented to us. And we're not really going to leverage, again, technology to take it to the next level for what an architectural project demands, or the interviews demand, or the presentations demand.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay.
And I don't have a coherent theory, but I do have some data points. So one data point is, when all of our students were forced to go digital, although it was completely digital, our curriculum is very heterogeneous. Our students draw by hand.
Mm-hmm.
They go to Rome and draw. We have 60 3D printers in our building,
mm-hmm.
tremendous amount of model building. I think we have 9 laser cutters for 200 students. Lots of physical work. Summer, their first year, they go out in the field and build stuff. It's a very physical curriculum, but they all went digital. And although there was a high degree of misery, the quality of the work was spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
The work was fantastic this year. So that's kind of issue number one. Issue number two is, there's enough digital, irrespective of whether the profession has leveraged it to its advantage in terms of productivity and value proposition, there's enough digital infrastructure in place that almost the entire profession shifted online in about 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
About 2 weeks, and everything was cool, and everybody's working. They weren't super happy about it, but everybody was working together. Thirdly, as we talked about earlier, one of the best ways to increase your profit margins is to decrease your overhead. And I talked to the CEO of one major firm who has, thousands of employees paying millions of dollars every month for rent, and his office is completely empty.
Yeah.
So I do not believe we're just going to go, whoopee, take off your mask, show everybody your vaccination badge. Let's go back to where we were before. There's going to be some kind of hybridized model,
sure,
which from a firm's perspective has the advantage of being able to reach talent anywhere.
Yeah.
So if I have a really talented employee who wants to live in, East Banana, Idaho, as long as I can get her on an airplane and get her to my office once a month for a few days, maybe that's okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe she comes for 2 weeks for a charrette.
Yeah. I agree with everything that you said. I guess where I'm drawing the line is that this is the new default, and we're not taking it to additional levels beyond this for as far as collaboration, as far as experiencing architecture goes, because it's either talking head or sharing a screen, right? So,
okay, so what would you suggest?
Well, there's a few new platforms that I'm pretty excited about. And this mainly circles around the idea of that kind of learning through osmosis for emerging professionals, where right now every meeting is scheduled, right? There's no dropping in. There's very little office hours kinds of a thing happening. So there's a handful of these software platforms out there where they're actually applying a layer of space to online meetings so that you can go to an office in famous podcasting air quotes here, and there's walls and you can go into rooms and they're proximity audio. So the closer you get to somebody, right, you can hear them and have conversations and tap somebody on the shoulder.
All right. I get it. All right. So let me tell you a project that I'm working on right now.
Okay.
And it's a complete science experiment that I'm doing with some faculty colleagues. But before the pandemic, I was working on a project on campus to create a very detailed data set that documents Rudolph Hall, which is our famous Paul Rudolph building. But I was doing it to demonstrate to Yale facilities that a digital asset in the form of a building information model was a useful thing to use to manage the building. Mm-hmm. It was a science project. We had some students, local firm was collaborating, did a laser scan, and around March, we had a finished Revit model. And so we had this great digital asset. And we also had a faculty member who teaches VR, but AR and VR, but from a theoretical perspective, not as a technology. We decided we're going to do an experiment, which we just started a couple months ago. He took our Revit model of Rudolph Hall, and this is a Paul Rudolph building with 37 levels and 43 staircases, a very complex building.
Yeah.
And he converted it into a gaming environment. Mm-hmm. He didn't render it in super realistic rendering. He rendered it in the style of a Paul Rudolph ink drawing. Mm-hmm. And then we put it into Unity. Mm-hmm. And we're starting to experiment with it as a social interaction platform.
I love
doing
that.
Exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So, like, our students have this tradition called 6 on 7, which is at 6 p.m. every Friday night on the 7th floor. They have a little beer party, and it's that all of that stuff has been wiped away from our culture, and it's really a problem.
Yep.
We're not together for lectures. We're not together for lunchtime seminars. We're not together in the studio. So I want a non-pedagogical platform for people to just go get together.
Yeah.
So next week, we're hoping they're going to try an experimental 6 on 7 in Unity in this gaming platform, doing exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to me, I think that's such an interesting idea. Like, that's going to play right back into your course about potential outcomes for an architectural practice. Like, there is going to open up this whole realm of architecture in the virtual that can be psychologically effective for people.
I agree. And I think it's probably the gateway drug to a future where actual full-scale human three-dimensional environments are hybridized between digital manifestations and physical manifestations. If my science project for Rudolph Hall really works, we're trying something that's probably overly ambitious, but there's a longstanding tradition in the Yale School of Architecture of playing badminton in the fourth floor review pit. They set up a badminton net at night. They play doubles badminton. There's a tournament that goes all semester long called the Rudolph Open, and they play at night all semester long. And it's a big part of our culture. It's fun.
Yeah.
They go to the gym and practice.
Yep.
So my next phase 2 of our virtual Rudolph Hall is to see if we can set up virtual badminton in the virtual fourth floor pit of virtual Rudolph Hall. So we'll see.
Highly competitive virtual badminton. I can see it now.
It is actually quite competitive.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, if you go on our website, architecture.yale.edu, you can see a video of these guys playing badminton in the pit. It's pretty fun.
That's awesome. So to bring that tech to everybody is not difficult anymore, right? It's so interesting to see. Like my mom got a new Oculus Quest 2, right? And if my mom's got one, because they're $299, like practically everybody can have one. And as a tool to experience things, whether it be architecture or outdoors, like I put that headset on and I was touring the Alps, right? From a drone kind of perspective. It's amazing. And how it affects you psychologically is amazing. So much so that when you take it off, you're a little disappointed that it's gone. And I think we found that in practice as well. When you're exploring a design that you've done and then you come back out into the office, it's a little bit disappointing. And so it really does kind of open up your eyes and your ideas about what space can do, even if it is virtual, as long as you are fully immersed within it. And that to me is really, really exciting stuff.
But I also think it begins to get interesting. That whole concept begins to get interesting, not just, experiencing the Alps flying in a virtual environment through a drone, but I think there's some really interesting questions about how that kind of an immersive environment can become a design environment where you can both understand and manipulate a design while in that immersive environment where you're somehow able to work on the design and understand the design and manipulate it in a perceptual space that's different than kind of traditional, screen on screen relationship. I mean, in the early days of Revit, I used to describe my fantasy architect's workstation was, 3 screens. The middle screen is the model of the building you're designing. The screen on the left is all your social media feeds, and the screen on the right are all the dashboards that are telling you what's going on with your design, your cost meter, your energy meter, your whatever meter. But I think there's a next generation idea around that where you're having that same kind of experience, but it's in a virtualized digital space.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me too about these kind of new platforms is the way that some of these startups are thinking about them as persistent space. So if you put something up on the wall in that space and then you leave it and then you come back the next day, the stuff is still there on the wall. Yeah. And that's really interesting, right? Because previously, like if you do a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting or whatever, like you're starting over every single time. You're wiping the slate clean, right? You're not coming back to a place.
Yeah. Although there is technology that does that, which and I think a lot of other architecture schools are using extensively too. We've become highly dependent on this tool called Miro, which is a big virtual space.
Like a big whiteboard.
And so when you're having like when we had final design reviews last spring, we did it again in the fall, the students are each given us a pinup space in Miro. They pin up all their materials in this virtual space.
Right.
The review is a Zoom review, and the student is managing an interaction with Miro. But if you want to, you can walk around and dive into any student's work, including videos that are hung there. So it's a big sort of interactive canvas.
Right.
And it's not wildly expensive. It's pretty robust.
Right. Oh, it's fantastic.
And that worked really well. So it's just like a regular review. You're kind of walking around the room looking at all the work, or you can stop in and listen to the one student who is presenting her work, but she's presenting it from the Miro pinup space.
Yeah.
That worked pretty well.
Yeah. No, that's a great example of that. And I think that those types of persistent workspaces that are virtual are gaining importance all the time because you don't want to have to start over and pin everything back up every single day that you come back to it. So that's, again, kind of pointing back to that comment that I was making about just using these platforms as the default, but not going beyond them. These are the types of things that I think architects need to leverage to really engage their clients to solve the problems for the buildings that they're designing.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, I don't know, I kind of think of my workspace here in my little home office as a kind of, my Oculus is a 3-dimensional workspace. And my old workspace was kind of 2-dimensional, and it's getting to kind of 2.5 because, I've got one screen that I'm working on. I have another screen that's a Cintiq touchpad.
Right.
Part of the time it just sits here like a second screen. Other times it sits on my desk and I'm drawing on it.
Yeah.
I had a meeting this morning on a really banal topic, financial aid, but my team knows that I am a relentless whiteboarder. I built a giant whiteboard in my office, which was the first whiteboard in Rudolph Hall. And so when we do these virtual meetings, I just whiteboard on my Cintiq and share the screen. So it's slowly getting there. And at the other end of the continuum, which is not workspaces, but how people actually experience space, I think you're going to see that divide getting really blurry. There's a really interesting firm in New York called ESI, run by a guy named Ed Schlossberg. He just got acquired by NBBJ, so he's running a studio inside of NBBJ. But they started out as museum exhibit designers. Then they got really good at digital museum exhibit designers. And then they became really good at these hybridized, digitized environments. So when you walk into the lobby of a New York, commercial office building and you see one of those massive digital walls, that's the kind of stuff they do. And that's not just advertising. That's the delamination of physical and digital space.
Absolutely.
That's definitely coming.
Yeah, and you can see applications for it immediately in classrooms and healthcare patient rooms where you can affect the psychology, the behavior, the intent to which or not the intent, but just the way that people can actually focus because of what's on those surfaces that are a thin film of digitization, right? I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff.
I completely agree. I think it's a very interesting kind of design vector that somebody should follow.
Do you guys do anything as experience design in that way at Yale for like going beyond just the built edifice, but actually applying these layers of technology or psychology, as it were?
I think that our faculty would argue that everything they do is experience. So I'm not sure it's such a bright line. I mean, out in the professional world, that line sort of exists.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not sure it exists in the pedagogical world of an architecture school,
I can see that.
Particularly because so much of the work is heavily digitized.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a texture map
people produce, videos of their work as a matter of course. No, there's not. They just the ability to produce. You want to talk about efficiency, the ability to produce quantities of high resolution work. I think back to my time as a grad student in the early 80s where, if I decided I was going to build a small chipboard study model, that was the rest of Sunday.
Yeah.
Now you just send it to a 3D printer and go do something else.
Yeah. Or the high definition, full color, fully textured photoreal video output is just incredible, right?
Yeah. Probably too incredible.
Yeah.
That's what's interesting about Jason Kim, who teaches our VR course. That's what's interesting about his work. He produced this high resolution version of Rudolph Hall, but instead of trying to make it look like a real experience, he texture mapped it as if Paul Rudolph had drawn it.
Yeah.
So, for example, one of the things you can do is you can position yourself in the middle of the model. And Rudolph, as you may remember, was famous for drawing these incredibly beautiful, complex, one-point perspective sections.
Right.
And you can walk through the building in a progressive section as it receives in one-dimensional space, rendered as if Paul Rudolph had drawn it.
It's an amazing experience that can be created. Absolutely.
Just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing experience.
I think there's something here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, this has been a fun conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time and being so generous with it. And I'm going to put links to as many things that we talked about as I can in the show notes so that people can check that out. There's so much more that we could talk about, so maybe another time. But again, thank you so much for spending the time today.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was good.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. This show is part of the Gable Media Podcast Network. You can see all the shows at gablemedia.com. That's GABLMEDIA.com. You can help support what I'm doing here by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help get the word out, and of course, share it with your friends. I'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment on the website at trxl.co/podcast, where you can find every episode. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. Just search for E. Troxel. Talk to you soon.